Alright, so we've got one of the Bauer Oscillating belt sanders with the spindle sander, kind of a 2-in-1. We're going to see what we got here. We're going to do a quick unboxing, and then we're going to do a comparison between this and the Ridgid. All the little bits and pieces. Well, there it is, not much to it. Okay, for years, this Ridgid oscillating belt sander has been the standard. You see it in all the guys' videos. We got this Bauer one. There's some differences. Some are good, some are bad. Some don't make a difference. So let's kind of check out and see what the difference is. So we both have a 4x24-inch belt. One thing to notice is that the belts turn in the opposite direction. Don't know if that makes a difference. The Bauer actually has aluminum, this one here is about a 1/4 inch thick aluminum pipe. This one here is probably about 3/16 good solid aluminum rollers, where we've got the Delron rollers over here on the Ridgid. So, you know, that's really good. Something else is the screw here is actually a normal US righty-lefty. Turn it to the right to tighten, left to loosen. To take this off, on here we've got left-handed threads. If you was to ever lose this little bolt here, you would definitely have to get a new one back. But one good thing about the Ridgid is the washer is captured on here so it doesn't come off, whereas with the Bauer, the washer, you know, you got to make sure you don't lose that little washer. Not a big deal. The Ridgid is this kind of bent metal. The whole thing is just bent metal, whereas the Bauer is actually like a cast aluminum frame. This here is a much heavier duty, feels actually better built than the Ridgid one. You know, the metal itself, backing plate is about the same, but it's on this cast frame. So the rods that go down, the connection, all that's relatively the same. So that's not enough to make a difference. So we got that back on. One thing that I did notice, that with the Bauer, you've got knobs on both sides you loosen to bring your table down, bring your table up. You've got your detents to lock it like 15, 30, 45 degrees at your most common angles. The Ridgid has one knob, and it's got those same detents, you know, where you can set it, you know, there's 45, then you just turn to one knob. It's a through rod, so it tightens both sides, where with the Bauer, you bring it down to 45, and you just have to tighten both sides. Not a big deal. However, if you notice, with the Ridgid, once the table's down, all of my little spindles, everything is captured inside of here so that nothing falls out. This here, if you're moving the machine around, you have the potential for these little spindles and stuff to fall off. Again, not a big deal, especially, you know, if you have your machine bolted down and you're not moving it around much, not a big deal. The Ridgid and the Bauer both have the exact same size rollers. We got a 2-inch, 1.5 inch, 1 inch, 3/4, and 1/2 inch, exactly the same. However, when we weighed, these are actually a little bit heavier. I'm not sure what kind of material those are made out of, but these were about 20-30 grams heavier than the Ridgid one. Also, one thing that I do like about the Bauer, now these are Delron, so whenever you add your spindle in here, we have our piece on the back. Both machines have a place to store these in the back, and then we drop those in, and then you have these little inserts to go right around our spindle. This is the 3/4. All right. So if you can, I don't know if you can see it, but you actually have an arrow on the Bauer telling you which direction they're going. But now these are Delron, you know, kind of like a type of plastic, and it's printed on both sides with your arrow, whereas the Ridgid has metal ones, but there's no print on it. You know, so basically the same thing. You know, these are just a little bit nicer. And then these have holes in them also. So when you collect your dust collection on the Bauer, you have, it looks like 1.25 inch dust fitting on the side. It will pull the dust down through these holes and help with the dust extraction. Whereas with the Ridgid, you have the solid one, so you don't get the dust extraction through the holes. However, with the Ridgid over here, we have the same little insert here. And when we drop our thing down, Ridgid has these little vents on the back, and right here is a 2-inch dust port. And so it, as it's spinning, because this one spins this way, the dust will come through these vents and out through the dust collection. You know, basically the same thing, but not quite. One thing that I find very peculiar is that with the Ridgid here, it has the one knob, and you use the same knob. Drop our washer on here, and we tighten this down, and this is the only knob we have to tighten our spindle down. With the Bauer, it comes with a nut, which you have to dig out of this little hole back here. Got a little nut. It also on this side has a little wrench, and it's a standard right hand thread nut. You got to get this thing lined up on here and tighten down with the regular washer, and that's what it says in the book to do. However, I don't understand why you would do that when you can put your washer on there and then take your standard little knob that you used for the spindle and use that same little knob, and it will screw right down on here. So I don't understand that portion of the book, why it wants you to use the nut instead of this thing. Here are the two machines running side by side. Even though the Bauer has a faster RPM motor, the gearing for the oscillation is a little bit slower, so you can tell that the Ridgid is actually moving up and down a little bit faster than what the Bauer is. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up, but I wanted to do just an actual comparison. So we got brand new belts on both of the sanders. I'm pushing just as hard as I normally would push. You know, I'm pushing in until the belt kind of starts bogging down. So this one I can't push as hard because it will bog the motor down, but I run it for 60 seconds. I'm going to speed this up, and then we're going to take the same board just on the opposite side, and we're going to use the Ridgid and push it as hard as we can and see just how much material we take off with the two sanders. You know, the Ridgid runs 1750, the Bauer runs 2000 RPMs. The Ridgid has a faster oscillation, whereas the Bauer has a slower oscillation. Does that equate to more material or less material moving? I don't know, we'll find out. So here is the Bauer after we got through with taking off that 1/8 inch of poplar, and then here is the Ridgid after the same test. Now the Ridgid did take more material off, but as you can tell, there is a lot more left on the sander itself. Okay, so I took the same piece of poplar, I marked 16-inch lines. I pushed in on this one until I could hear the motor slowing down. I didn't want to stall the motor out. I pushed a little bit hard and it almost sounded like the motor was about to bog down. Now this has got a 3.5 amp motor. So I was using 400 grit. I put brand new belts on both of these sanders. And so this was a brand new 400 grit, which 400 grit is not made to take down material. It's just to smoothen out. But I wanted to see just how well this would perform. Now it gave me a super smooth finish, and it took off 2/16, which is 1/8 of an inch of material. Now you can see on the belt here, there is it went about 1.5 inches. So our oscillating up and down on this one goes about 1.5 inches. Well, on the Ridgid one, you can see here, much more, we're looking at 2 inches that this went up and down. It also took off 3/16 of an inch. So it took off 50% more wood, and it did it over a wider area of the belt, which means that your belt is going to wear less, because a lot of times you're just sanding smaller objects, and so this part of the belt's not being used. The more of the belt that's going up and down, the more you're putting the wear out. And you can see just by the amount of sawdust that's in the belt, I was actually able to push harder, which is probably why the sawdust is embedded into the belt, because this one didn't bog down, but it has a 5 amp hour motor. So you do have some differences, and I believe that they are justified in their price. I think that this Bauer sander is a fabulous little sander. It's going to do everything that the Ridgid sander can do. However, it is a 3.5 horsepower motor compared to a 5, or not horsepower, but an amp hour motor to a 5 amp hour motor. So we're talking about a 50% stronger motor. It also has an 1.5 inch oscillation, whereas the Ridgid has a 2-inch oscillation. And with the combination now, the Ridgid claims 1750 RPMs, and the Bauer is 2000 RPMs. And I do believe that when you turn them on, you can hear that the Bauer seems to be going faster, but when you put it under load, it does sound like the motor is slowing down. So I don't know what our RPMs under load is, whereas the 1750 on the Ridgid, no matter how hard I pushed, I couldn't tell any difference in the sound of the motor. It didn't sound like it was slowing down at all. Now there is a little bit more sawdust on the Ridgid, so just in this instance it looks like the Bauer may have a better dust collection, but now the Bauer has the smaller hose, and so I was using my smaller vacuum, and to make it fair, I used the same vacuum on both. However, the Ridgid has a 2-inch adapter, and I normally have my bigger vacuum with the 2-inch hose connected to this. So I think it may be designed to have a higher airflow, because when I'm using it with the 2-inch hose, it seems to do a lot better for the dust collection. But overall, both of them are very good. However, the Ridgid right now is $329, whereas the Bauer is $199. So we're talking a little over 50% more in price. So it almost seems to me that it is an exact same value. You're going to pay 50% more, but in the same period of time you get 50% more material removal. However, you don't always need to get that much speed, that much material remover. So if you are not in a high production shop, I believe this Bauer may be a better option, because one, it's going to be cheaper. Two, it's going to have a smaller footprint, but still be able to do everything that the Ridgid does. So if you had any experience with this, if you agree with me, let me know. Put it down in the comments. I would love to hear your feedback. And until the next time, thanks for watching.